Hey, my name is Colleen Worden. I'm the president of the board. Thank you for being here. We are thrilled that you're all a part of this committee. Thank you for volunteering your time. The first thing we're going to do is stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance, and then Dr. Tuttle is going to ask everyone to introduce themselves. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we do introductions, we're going to do a public comment. Is there anyone here that would like to do a public comment before our meeting? No one? Go ahead.
Yes, my name is Ahmed Ismail, and I wanted to present some concerns or some advice for you folks as you move forward with what you're doing. I've been watching bonds and involved in the bonds in this community for a little over 2 decades. And one of the key things that you have a responsibility for, and Mrs. Fannin will know this better than anybody, is you need to put out the criteria and the CVs of all of you on these committees. Everybody's basically going to be looking to you as to your guidance and whether or not they should put another $100 and some odd million into the school system. So it's really important that the segments of this group, whether you're an educator, whether you're a construction person, whether you're a finance person, or whether you're a community influencer, that those be clearly defined and that they be funneled so that they're 1 + 1 + 1 makes 5. And I would focus a great deal of your effort initially on these meetings in getting that together. And the other thing I'd recommend you do is that you, as soon as you can, get a process put in place that people can clearly understand and follow how this is going to work, and so they can follow those steps through and not feel like they're muddling through things. And I wish you the best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Does anybody else like to make a comment? Matt?
Hi, my name is Matt Kale. I've got 2 youngins who hopefully will be a part of the system. 2 things that I'm going to be interested in as a likely voter of the bond are what projects we're considering signing up for and that affect the operating budget in some way. So which projects that we have potentially relieve pressure that we have in the operating budget, and which ones would increase pressure that we have from the operating budget. I know that we have taxes that we can use to help us with building projects like this, but we don't have that luxury when it comes to our operating budget costs. So that's what I'm going to be looking for, and if you can up the communication in that regard, it would help me. Also, building capacity. I've noticed kind of fluctuations in what the supposed building capacity is from building to building. So if there are projects that are potentially affecting, increasing, or decreasing building capacity from elementary, middle, and high school levels, I'll be looking out for that too. Thank you all for your work. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else want to make a public comment? No one? Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, President Worden, and thank you for being here this evening. I want to tell you a little bit about housekeeping. If you need to use, I'm Andrea Tuttle, by the way, I'm the superintendent. If you need to use the restroom, it's out these doors straight through. If you don't have an agenda, there are agendas at the table as well as water for community members, so please help yourself if you're here. I want to tell you a little bit about the community makeup this evening. We have 3 board members who will introduce themselves in a moment. We have 11 administrators representing various facets of our district. And then we have 20 community members, which could be teachers, community members for various reasons. There were 80 individuals who applied. 20 of you were selected. If you want to know why you were selected, there are various reasons that people were selected. You represent some facet of our community that we want to make sure that we represent the arts. We want to represent every one of the points in Harper Woods. We wanted to represent schools from every facet of our community. And then we were looking for expertise too. So you all bring some sort of professional expertise to the table as well. So thank you for being here. I'm going to try to be really respectful of people's time this evening. And we're going to start with introductions of the community group. But this is how this is going to work. Again, we're going to be succinct. So if you're a board member, I'm going to ask that you introduce yourself when we get to you as a board member, and if you have children in the district, or if you have children that graduated. Trustee Klepp's not here yet, right? No, he should be coming. Okay. If you're an administrator, the 11 administrators, please introduce yourself, what building you're an administrator in. Again, if you have children in the district. If you're a graduate of Grosse Pointe, that's another thing that I think you find interesting, so you can share that as well. And if you have children who are alumni of the district. If you're a community member, I'm going to ask that you say your name. And if you have children in the district, what buildings, and if you have alumni in the district. So I want this to go as quickly as possible. You are going to have opportunities to work in groups to meet each other more thoroughly throughout this whole process. All right? As a teacher, I'm going to role model this for you. Good evening. I'm Andrea Tuttle. I'm the superintendent of Grosse Pointe Schools. Unfortunately, my children did not go to Grosse Pointe, nor did I graduate from Grosse Pointe, nor do I have any alumni from Grosse Pointe. So there you go. That's how it goes. Anyone want to start? Volunteers? Andrea, go.
Do I have to stand up?
Yes, please stand up. Yes.
Hi everyone, my name is Andrea Gruenwald. I teach at Parcells. I live in Grosse Pointe Park. I'm a Grosse Pointe North alumni, and then I have an incoming kindergartner and a first grader at Defer.
Let's go around your table.
I'm Andrea Doherty. I teach at Pierce, and I have a sixth grader at Pierce and a fourth grader at Defer.
Hi, I'm Sara Dirske. I am the principal at Pierce, and I have a first grader in the district and a sixth grader in the district as well.
Hi, my name is Cindy Paravano. I'm the principal at South. While I don't have any children of my own at South, I have 1,000 adopted children who run around the school every day. I'm not an alumni of the area, but I enjoy serving here.
Yep, just keep going. Yep.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Juan Ruiz. I have 3 children in the district from Monteith, Parcells, and at North.
Hi, I'm Mariel Krupansky. I'm from Harbor Woods, and I have a 2-year-old daughter who just got into the early childhood program at Barnes. So.
Let's go to this table. Tyrion, you want to go?
Sure.
Hi, I'm Taryn Laughlin. I'm an English teacher at South. I'm a transplant, and I guess I technically have an alumni because my son was at Trombley the year when it closed. And I'm also the co-president of the Teachers Union.
Yeah.
All right.
Don't be shy.
My name is Ben Matteson. I'm the facilities director with the district. I have no children in the district, and I'm not an alumni. I've been with it 3 years and I'm proud of it.
Good evening. My name is Wilson Moin. I am an alumni of the district. I have 3 children, 2 that are through, and 1 special needs child is still here at North. This is my 4th committee. I was on the blue ribbon for the school closures. I was on the previous bond advisory. I was also on the previous bond oversight committee.
Hi, Tom Caulfield, resident of Grosse Pointe Park. I'm also an alumni of the Grosse Pointe school system, along with my wife, who's an alumni. We have 3 kids. One is an alumni of South. He's at U of M, and our 2 daughters are freshmen and freshman and senior at South.
Andy Rishmawi, I'm the athletic director at Grosse Pointe South. I'm not an alumnus. I have 4 kids, 3 of which hopefully when I move will be students in the Grosse Pointe school system.
I'm Rebecca Fannin. I worked for the district for 18 years. I am not an alum, and my husband still married me. Despite that fact, he is a proud graduate of South, as are my 3 oldest boys who went to Kerby, Brownell, and South, and my youngest is at Richard.
Let's go back to Sam. Let's go to your table.
Hi everyone, I'm Sam Lamberti-McGrath. I'm the assistant principal over at Parcells. I'm a graduate of Grosse Pointe South, and I have a young 5er at Richard and a 3-year-old in the preschool program.
I'm Neil Soroka. I'm a council member of Grosse Pointe Farms and the president of the Grosse Pointe Rotary Club. I have a daughter who is at Kerby School. She is in 2nd grade.
I am Joe Janae. I have a 8th grader at Parcells and a 3rd grader at Ferry. Professionally, I am the marketing communications director at Roseville Schools. Have been for 20 years. We've passed a couple bonds there, and I've been part of the last bond committee, parent committee in this district. So my wife is also the Grosse Pointe North dance team coach, PTO member at Parcells and formerly Ferry. So we been around.
Dr. Bishop.
Hello everybody, my name is Roy Bishop, Deputy Superintendent for the district, and I have 3 kids. I have one that is at North, 2 is at Parcells, my oldest is turning 15.
Today.
Today, absolutely.
Happy birthday.
Make me pay for it because I see she's charging some things on Amazon.
John Arnold, Grosse Pointe Farms, have 2 children who are graduates of Grosse Pointe South and a granddaughter who will be entering the school district in another 3 years.
Good evening, my name is Anita Hassan, principal at Mason Elementary School. I'm not an alumni of the district, but I have all my kiddos at Mason that I truly cherish.
Hello, I'm Tim Brumbaugh. We live in Grosse Pointe Park. I have 2 daughters at Pierce and 1 son at DeFer.
Bob Cruz, live in Grosse Pointe City, have a son at Brownell and a 4th grader at Richard.
You do it. Go. I'm Pat Chesterton. I have a junior at South and a 8th grader at Pierce.
Hi everyone, Melissa Palatu. I have a 2nd grader at Kerby, and I have a 5th grader at Brownell.
Hi, I'm Sara Coates. We moved from out of state about 9 years ago, and our kids are at DeFer, Pierce, and South.
Kaveh Kashef, Grosse Pointe North, class of 91. I've got a 2nd grader and a 4th grader at Ferry.
I'm Ed Lazar, business owner in the community for a long time, 45 years. I coach at Pierce, cross country, and track at South, and have 2 daughters that graduated from North in 2004 and 2006. And that was a long time ago, too.
Lisa Rheaume, I'm the principal at DeFer Elementary School. I graduated from Grosse Pointe North, and my 3-year-old daughter will be at Barnes in the fall.
Walter Fitzpatrick, recently retired administrator here in the district. I worked at Pierce, Trombley, and Kerby. I have 3 children who went through the Grosse Pointe schools. My youngest is in his final semester at Central Michigan, and I'm currently the executive director of Grosse Pointe STEAM.
Good evening, I'm Sara Delgado. I'm the principal here at Grosse Pointe North, formerly principal at Parcells, formerly at Kerby, so I know a lot of faces in this room and taught at several of the elementaries. I have 3 children, 2 of whom attend here, a junior and a freshman. The freshman had soccer tryouts at Fraser Total Soccer, which also started at 6, so I apologize for my tardiness. That was what brought me here a little late. I have a 7th grader at Parcells, and not an alum, grew up in Pittsburgh, but have been working and living in Grosse Pointe for about 19 years now. Welcome to North. Thanks for hosting.
Sean Cotton, I'm a trustee, graduate of Grosse Pointe South, class 95, and I have a 7th grader at Brownell and a 10th grader at South.
Last but not least, I am Colleen Worden. I'm a Board of Trustees trustee, and my daughter is a freshman at North.
Thank you.
I wasn't sure. I'm Paul Terrio with Plant Moran Real Point. I'm not a Grosse Pointer, but I've been working with the district since 2018.
I'm Gary Kent. I'm also with Plant Moran Real Point. I am a Grosse Pointer. I have 2 kids, but they're a little too young to be in school yet, so one day.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. They're going to handle part of the presentation, so I didn't ostracize them for a reason. Important people back there. So I want to tell you a little bit of how this evening is going to go. First and foremost, we're going to go through a presentation. Can everybody hear me okay? Because I do have a mic if you cannot. We're going to go through the presentation. You will be receiving this presentation tomorrow in PDF form. So unlike school, you don't have to take notes unless you want to. It will also be posted on our website tomorrow at some point. So if anyone wants to, from the community wants to see it, they have access to it as well. Also on your table are index cards and writing utensils. Because we're going to go through a lot today, we don't have a lot of time for questions. So what I'm going to ask you to do is when you think of a question, please write it on an index card. Please include your name on that index card. We'll be collecting those at the end. We will be answering them to start the next meeting. Okay, so that's how this process is going to go this evening. As I said, this is a pretty packed agenda that I'm going to share with you in a moment. I'm actually going to stand back there so that I can look at it as well. And we're going to follow along exactly how the agenda goes. I am going to skip some slides. I've put things in different formats for you to look at, so when you get it tomorrow, you can review it more, and if you have additional questions, obviously, bring those to the next meeting as well. Any questions about the process? All right, here we go. So first and foremost, I've already introduced myself. I thanked you. We've gone through the housekeeping, but what I want to show in this slide is the bond, your objective. The committee's role is to assess district needs, provide input on potential bond projects, and offer guidance to the Board of Education on key components to be introduced in the 2025 bond renewal language and educational outreach. So basically, this group is going to make a recommendation to the board, but ultimately the board decides. The agenda for the evening is going to go as follows. There are key people in the room who have already introduced themselves, but I have them listed as key stakeholders. Rebecca Fannin, you're a key community liaison. You were part of the last bond, and so we're going to turn to you a little bit throughout this as well. Maybe not tonight, but moving forward. So if you can raise your hand so people can see who you are as well. I'm going to give a little overview of school funding. I'm going to give a rationale for why we're asking for a bond renewal. I'm going to give a planning timeline, which is up there right now. You'll see it again, but again, you don't have to write it down. You can see meetings we have now. We have 3 set for 2-hour meetings, tonight being the first, 2 subsequent meetings. And then the June meeting is to be determined, although it might be May 28th. President Worden and I will have to discuss that because ultimately we're hoping to get a recommendation to the board on June 9th, because on June 23rd meeting, we're hoping that the board will have the final recommendation as a second read. Board meetings go first read and a second read, and hopefully we'll have the bond language approved for June 23rd. So we have to get that to our attorneys to do so. Also, key points, the ballot proposal submission deadline that we have to have it in order to put it on the ballot is August 11th. So we're in a little bit of an expedited crunch phase. Typically a bond of this magnitude would take a little bit longer to plan, those of you who've been involved in those. So we're moving a little bit more quickly so that we can meet these deadlines. The election date is November 4th, and then our informational campaign will be August through November until the election date. And we hope that you can all assist us with that. And then we have an activity for you this evening as well. All right. Again, almost all these slides that I'm presenting you to this evening have been presented in some format, whether it be at a committee meeting, whether it be at a bond meeting, a sinking fund meeting, whether it be at a community meeting, or a board meeting itself. So some of you have heard some of this, some of you have maybe heard none of this, but I want to get everybody on a level playing field with information. Any questions about that? All right, so how are public schools funded? Why do we even need to go for a bond? So the state funding is our primary source, which is our school aid fund. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. That's how much we receive for a foundational allowance for each of our students. Local funding is what we're talking about this evening. It's your property taxes and millages and bonds, and that's what we are today. Federal funding, supplemental aid for specific programs, Title I, so forth. And then there are other sources of funding. We have lots of foundations, local foundations in Grosse Pointe that fund several programs. Key takeaways from this slide, Michigan schools are primarily funded by the state through a per pupil formula. I'm going to talk about how much we receive in a moment. Local property taxes, so everybody's on board. We passed our operating mill, as you know, that's our 18 mil non-homestead tax for the next 5 years. That equates to $22 million that is brought into our district. And the state assumes we are collecting that. So if we don't collect that, it is a deficit of $22 million. So thank you to the voters for overwhelmingly supporting that. And then our federal funds, as I said, are supplemental state and local funding for specific programs. So those cannot be used for general funds. They have to be used for specific programs denoted in the grants. And then the bonds and sinking funds. Again, I'm not going to go through this whole slide again. But I do want to bullet point 2, the minimum foundation allowance, and some people don't know this, but the minimum foundation allowance for 23-24 and again for 24-25, because it didn't increase, is $9,608 per student. That's what we call a basic foundation. That's what the majority of schools in the state of Michigan receive for every student who sits in a seat. Grosse Pointe, back in the day of Governor Engler, many of you might be familiar with this, when Proposal A passed, school districts like Grosse Pointe, who had a very high taxable value, said we don't want to be equal with everybody else because we bring in more taxes. At that time, they were called 20J schools. The 20J schools receive more funding, and a lot of it, you can see it's through operating expenses as well. So we collect this year $11,303 per student. I'm not going to go through the rest of this, but you can see the sources of state funding. You can look at that at your own. I'm not going to, again, this is a lot of the same, but it explains the 18 mills and what they're on. The federal funding, again, this is just further explanation of that. Again, you'll get this tomorrow. You can look through these, and if you have additional questions, you can ask. I think this slide is really important because it shows the difference between a bond, a sinking fund, and an operating millage. I'm going to go to the right column first because we've discussed it a lot. The operating millage can be used for roughly anything in a school district. It can be used for people, tables, furniture, whatever the case may be, whatever it takes to operate a district. You can see the funding sources through local property taxes. Again, thanks to the community for supporting that. And then it requires voter approval, and it's usually every 10 years. We did a 5-year operating millage, so obviously in 5 years, the district will be requesting that again. Going back to the bond on the left, bond and sinking fund, I'm going to kind of do these, juxtapose them one against each other. But a bond is used for large-scale capital projects and improvements, but it incurs interest and debt for that, versus a sinking fund, which is pay-as-you-go. We get about, now with the 3 mills, again, thank you to our community, it was 1 mill. 1 mill in Grosse Pointe is roughly $3.6 million. That's roughly, and it's based on your taxable value. 3 mills then is roughly 11 million. If you multiply that by 3, and as your taxable value goes up, obviously that would go up as well. So as that money comes in, you can expend it at that time. You can also bank it. So let's say you have a project that you want to do for $40 million. You can bank that sinking fund if you choose to do so, and then ultimately spend it. Bonds, as I indicated, used for large-scale capital improvements such as building new schools, major renovations, infrastructure upgrades, and purchasing land or equipment. Your funding source, the school district borrows money by issuing bonds, which are repaid over time with interest on the property tax. Requires board approval. It cannot be used for the day-to-day operations, and nor can a sinking fund. I am going to stop. Any questions on that? That's a big one. All right. This is the exact same slide, put in a different format. So I'm not going to go over that with you, but if you'd like to peruse through this when you get the PDF, you may do so. So why? Why are we even asking for a bond? Why are we asking for a renewal? We have a bond. We're asking to renew or maintain the mills on that bond right now. So these, we're kind of backwards. These are the 4 questions that I presented to the board when I recommended to them that they go for a bond renewal, and they approved doing so. So the first question, should a bond extension be presented to the voters? My answer, was yes. And my rationale for that, a bond would generate, and I'm going to show you this in a future slide, approximately $120 million in revenue without increasing the current millage rate for Grosse Pointe. Data indicates that the school bond elections with no millage increases, which is what we would be going for in November. If it doesn't pass in November, I'm going to show you in a moment, it will be a millage increase. But with no millage increase, they pass at a rate of 84%. If you have a millage increase, it passes at 51%. So doing this in November maximizes the likelihood of voter approval. When should the bond extension be placed on the ballot? I recommended to the board November. The other option was August, but we didn't go for August because, as I said, we're already expedited as it is. We need more time to plan. The rationale, although an August election is also viable for a no millage increase proposal, a November election is more cost effective. And the reason that is because you might have municipalities, council people on the ballot, maybe, maybe not, that help share the cost of that. What should be the term? 20 years. I'll explain that in a moment. Another option was 24 years. You get a better bang for your buck, in my opinion, what I shared with the board. 20 years will generate about $120 million in revenue, while 24 years would yield about 124. So $4 million, but you will also, the community will also spend about $20 million additional in interest rate to get $4 additional million in revenue, which didn't seem like a great bang for your buck. And then what language should be included on the ballot? The ballot language should clearly and accurately describe the intended use of the funds generated by the bond. This requires a thorough review by the board and you to evaluate and finalize the language. We send it to an attorney. So once this group decides, we send it to the attorney. They write the bond language for us. this is a big slide as to the why. I know I said I wasn't going to do this, but any questions on this? Yes?
How do we create the revenue to pay the interest payments on the bond?
Selling the bonds, all incorporated in the package deal. Yep. All right. I'm kind of saying the same thing to you again, but in 2024, you see a drop off of a millage. We have this year to get back to that and to hold steady at the exact same mills we're currently paying on the bond. That's why we're going for it. If you go for it, in 2026, it's already dropped, and now you're going to ask to recoup that. So that's why we have to go in 2025. We are a December levy, so that we can continue to levy the same amount of mills this December. If we don't pass this, then that mill drops off, and then you're asking for the full amount again, so it becomes a new tax to people and much harder to sell. I'm not going to go over much of that because I do talk about it a little bit more. I already shared all of this, why 20 versus the 24, 25-year series bond issues, and I show it again in this format. If I had a laser cleaner, I do. In this format, you can see what I'm trying to show here is if you see the interest rate differential, 83 million for, if you can see the 83 million, $3,625. That's what the interest rate would be on a 20-year series. If you go down to the 24 years, which is the table 1B, that's the 20 additional $1 million that I was talking for. And if you go back over to the right, the bond amount, that's where you only capture the 4 additional $1 million. Again, there's some redundancy, but different ways to look at things. This chart is showing the same thing in a chart form, why I recommended 20 years versus 24 years. Estimated lead time, I already kind of talked to that. We have to have our filing deadline. It's August 12th for a November 4th election. That's why we have to have it in by August 11th, which is what I shared with you before. So we're a December tax levy. I think and this is something that PFM is who we work with to sell the bonds. It's going to be a quick turnaround. This will require, looking at the last bullet point and reading it to you, this will require certain number of the bonds issuance steps to be completed prior to the bond election. Sorry, there's a word missing there. Including the preparation of the preliminary official statement and application of bond rating, among others. Okay. Sorry, I pushed the wrong button. Again, you've seen this, but this is for you to peruse through the timeline of the meeting, so please put these in your calendar. I'm hoping to have that June date solidified. President Worden and I can chat. But also, depending on how things go, we may need to add a meeting, so we're going to kind of play that by ear. And that June meeting might actually be May 28th, because with graduations and so forth, there aren't a lot of available dates in June to meet prior to that June 9th board meeting. All right. Any questions for me? Because I'm going to turn it over to Plant Moran, who's going to say who they are. And then they're also going to show some other data that might affect your decisions today. Specifically talking about our utilization assessment that was done in 2022, the update that was done, and then we're going to do an activity when they're completed. So with no further ado, Paul Terrio from Plant Moran.
Yep. Great. So I just thought I'd give a quick overview on kind of who we are. I think everyone probably is familiar with Plant Moran, and as I mentioned before, we've been out in the district since 2017, helping plan the 2018 bond and the sinking fund in 19, and again last year. Helped implement the bond and done a lot of things. But Plant Moran is the 11th largest corporate services firm in the country. About 4,000 people in 26 offices across the country, Colorado, Michigan, the Midwest, and actually 4 international offices. Plant Moran Real Point is one of the groups that kind of grew out of Plant Moran. Plant Moran's been in business for 100 years this past year. We've been around for 30. We're really a corporate services real estate consulting firm. So we help a lot of corporate entities, public entities, healthcare clients with their real estate needs, which could be a lot of different things. We have a really big public sector practice. So there's about 550 school districts across the state. We work with about 100 of them. And a lot of them right here in southeastern Michigan, helping plan bonds, helping do enrollment projections, utilization studies, things like that. We have a lot of architects and engineers, attorneys, construction professionals on staff to really help clients with whatever they need to get their capital projects off the ground and planned and implemented. So I think that one might be out of order, but this is just a sample of some of the clients we work with. Out of the top 50 districts, we work with about 38, obviously including yourselves. We're also leading the charge for the state with the School Finance Research Foundation that's doing a facility assessment of every school across the state of Michigan and an energy audit of many of them. We're helping lead that charge across the state. So, in fact, I think that first report was just given a couple of months ago. So, again, we do a lot of real estate consulting, and then real estate brokerage work, and then the bulk of what we do is program management, helping people put capital programs together and implement them. So this next couple slides were just presented last Monday at the board meeting by Paul Wills, and there's a little bit of new data in here, but the gist of it is the same. Declining enrollment is not a Grosse Pointe problem. It is a national problem, quite frankly, and it's a Michigan problem. With everything that's happened in the last 20 years with the economy, with people moving south, with Michigan's population aging and being pretty flat, and flat's probably lucky that it's flat, because for a while there it was actually shrinking. But this is the number of K through 12 students enrolled in Michigan public schools over the last 20 years. So you can see that's not a pretty picture. This is the birth rate chart in Wayne County since 1990. Again, not a great picture. It's been steadily declining. And you can see the brackets of your kind of current students from the class of, well, I guess, born in 2007 all the way till the kindergartners on the far right there. So you can see the older classes are a lot larger than the incoming classes, which doesn't help the problem in hand. These are new. We got your fall audited numbers just a couple of weeks ago, so we've been working to try to update these. So these are slightly different than what Paul showed on Monday. But your audited fall count numbers show that you had, if you count, I guess the first subtotal there is really K-12, and then below is special ed, young fives, adult ed, and some different sums of those. But really there's about 6,400 kids total if you count everybody. Or 5,900 if you just count K through 12. And as that projects out over the next 5 years, you can see it's showing that you're still going to lose a couple hundred kids. If you look back to 2018, or even further back, the district's lost about 1,500 kids in a pretty short span of time. But again, this is not unique to Grosse Pointe. I would say 95% of our clients have declining enrollment, if not more. There's a few pockets in southeastern Michigan where there's a lot of new homes being built out in South Lyon or Woodhaven or places like that, or maybe Ann Arbor or Dearborn tend to be a little more stable with some of the immigration things as they ebb and flow. But again, not a Grosse Pointe problem. It's really a Michigan and a Southeast Michigan problem. This is just an easier way to look at it if you think about kind of your different groups of kids, K5, 6, 8, and 9, 12. You can see the K5 is at the top, so that's kind of sliding a little bit. Middle school is a little more stable. High school's kind of leveling off there after it fell pretty drastically. So, and again, it's about 1,500 kids since 2017. If you actually look at the capture rate of the number of kids born in Wayne County versus the percentage that go to Grosse Pointe, it's actually pretty stable over that period of time. So it really is largely just a lower birth rate. People are getting married later, they're having fewer kids, if any at all, waiting longer to start families, that type of thing. This is a little bit of a eye chart to read, but we did a building utilization study back in 2017, and this is really just kind of looking at your enrollment numbers and projecting that forward. Building utilization is a little bit of an art as much as a science. What we're really trying to do is we're trying to look across your district to see what spaces could be classrooms, and then what are your target numbers of kids that you would want in those classrooms at each grade level. Some districts look at it on a contract maximum of how many kids they can put in a classroom before they have to add a teacher or a parapro. Other districts may have a lower target. Other districts may have a higher target. District's targets change over the years, so I would guess that your target in 2017 is probably a couple more kids per class than it may be today, or vice versa. So if you look at the far 3 right-hand columns, basically what this shows is that in 2017 across the district, the utilization was about 70%, and then in 2022 it was projected at about 63, and then today it's about 60%. The elementary schools are a little higher, and the high schools are probably a little bit less. Generally speaking, you don't want to be at 100%. You want to be at about 80 to 85% is a pretty healthy number in a school, because you want to have some space to spread out, or for a large incoming class, or things like that, resource rooms, breakout rooms, things like that. But you guys are at 60%, which is pretty low. So. Gary? So
this slide, one of the things we help do to help plan the bond is we say a facility assessment. What that is we walk and evaluate every building with roofs, parking lots, boilers, classrooms, mechanical, you name it. We did that in 2022. We conducted that facility assessment with some other consultants, the district, and at that time we identified $252 million of need in the district over a 10-year capital plan. Since that was conducted in 2022, we had 3 years of escalation on top of that, which came out to roughly $44 million. And since then, we also identified some additional scope that came up throughout the district as needs, which total roughly $23 million, updated the 2025 facility assessment to $319,250,000. There's obviously some other funding sources that help tackle some of that $319 million, the 2018 bond, the 2019 sinking fund, and the 2024 sinking fund, which took a good majority of that need. But ultimately, the remaining district need after all those other funding sources came out to $198,250,000. From that amount, we worked with the district to identify some critical needs in the district. Some of the common themes that you'll see in the next few slides are mechanical, plumbing, electrical, environmental, which is abatement work. Of that total, we came up with $60,250,000 of critical needs. And those are really lights. You can go to the next.
Yeah, just real quick before I do, I think it's worth mentioning that one of the reasons that this committee is able to, I think, get put together so quickly and move so quickly is really we haven't stopped talking about the district's needs since 2017 when the Blue Ribbon Committee was put together. I mean, we went right into the bond, which passed, thank you again to the community, and then we started planning the sinking fund in 2019, and then we did a new facility assessment in 2022, and then we went into the next sinking fund. So really, the district has never taken their eyes off what the needs of the district are. And this 10-year capital plan is really meant to be a living, breathing document. So in 2022, it may show 252, but as we all know, construction costs go up every year, escalation and inflation. Different things come up. There may be a piece of mechanical equipment that was in great shape, but it has a useful life, and eventually it does need to be replaced, just like a roof has a useful life or windows have a useful life. So really, it's meant to be a living, breathing document where a month from now it may look slightly different than it looked today. And then the district's priorities change, funding sources, the mandates from the federal government or from the state government change, and they change the way education, the way kids are taught and teachers teach. So there's really, it's really, I think, a good point to make that we've never really stopped looking at what needs to be done because things are constantly aging. Even the media center, which we did in the last bond, 10 years from now, the carpet's going to need to be replaced. And 20 years from now, the windows might need to be replaced. So it really never stops.
So what this slide breaks down is that $60 million number. It does it by work scopes, such as building envelopes, which are roofs, windows, exterior doors, interior renovations, such as the media center, things of that nature. And then we also broke it down by building, so you can kind of see where the dollars fall. Critical needs, as you can see in the bottom, are items that need to be addressed in the next 0 to 3 years and are critical to building function and safety so that students can actually go into the buildings and learn. Abatement, life safety, security, roofing, mechanical, electrical, plumbing are some of the key examples that we've seen.
Yeah, so of that 198, basically what we're saying is about 60 million of it is really in that critical or next 3-year category. The balance of it would be years 4 to 5 and 7 to, or 4 to 6 and 7 to 10, let's say, or maybe less critical. Carpet, you know, it'd be nice to replace the carpet every 10 years. Is it critical to the function of the school? Probably not. The mechanical system in winter needs to function. You as an example. The fire alarm systems need to function. The parking lot needs to be navigable. The roof can't leak. So those are really what we're calling critical. And a lot of those things were obviously going to be hopefully tackled by the sinking fund plan, but not all of them. There was still about $60 million worth of critical needs out of that 200.
Overarching what he's saying is that if it passes the 120 million, the district, and by say primarily Plant Moran as well as Mr. Matteson in their expertise, so there's about 60 of it that is already spoken for. So this group has about $60 million that we're going to be working on to decide if and when hopefully the bond passes, what that additional 60 million getting to the full 120 will be used for. So that's why we're showing this very closely. I just also want to say that this living, breathing document, which we look at constantly, looks like this, and then it's color-coded. Just so you can see it, it's kind of color-coded where we took off the things that have been done or slated to be done in the future with the sinking fund dollars, and that's how those numbers were generated. And then things get added. $23 million was added and so forth.
Yeah, and we thought that was a little bit ridiculous amount of detail to show. So what we tried to do is actually maybe give a simpler way of looking at what those needs are and what some of the things that we've accomplished are in the bond and sinking fund. So you can see this is Barnes, and there's one of these for each building, but you can see what the 2018 bond tackled. You can see what we did out of the sinking fund in 2019, what's planned for the new sinking fund, and then what some of those critical needs are that we're projecting for the new bond. So, and again, some of these things, you can see Barnes, we did the construction in 2022, so it gives you an idea kind of, that was, I think, the third year of construction on the last bond. And you can see we replaced some of the mechanical units. That doesn't mean we replaced all of them. We did some technology upgrades, we did some plumbing and restroom renovations, some electrical upgrades, but again, that doesn't mean we fixed all the electrical system, but we did a pretty fair amount. Did some asbestos abatement, some new doors and hardwares on the classrooms, some ceilings, restroom renovations again, some millwork, some LED lighting, etc. So we have a sheet like this for each building. I don't know if we want to go through all of them.
Well, I do, but what I want people to really focus on, if you put it in a kind of a quadrant, that bottom right quadrant is what equates to the 60 million. So if you added that quadrant in all the subsequent slides, that's how we came to the 60 million. So this is just another way of showing you those are the things that have been identified by the district that equate to the 60 million if you want to look at it in a different format. But the rest is historical information as well. So I guess to answer your question, if you could go through each building but just focus on that bottom quadrant, they can look at the others.
So you'll probably see a lot of common themes in this.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of plumbing, mechanical, electrical, environmental work at pretty much every building. Again, it's those 0 to 3 year items that are critical for students to, walk into a classroom and actually learn about the building.
Yeah, and then the last bond, I think we made a great dent in a lot of the needs, but we weren't able to always do the same work in every building. You guys have some beautiful historic buildings with slate roofs and beautiful masonry and limestone, but some of those old bathrooms are not inexpensive to renovate. So we did a lot of buildings. We did the toilet rooms, but we didn't do it in every toilet room in every building. We're trying to really get some of these buildings to be more equitable in the work that was accomplished, so that when you walk into a classroom, it looks very similar to what it does. So yeah, for defer, you can see plumbing, mechanical, some interior finishes, some kitchen renovations, and some restroom renovations.
Yeah, for Ferry, we have some life safety issues. We're going to do interior finishes, some plumbing, HVAC, electrical, some envelope work, and restroom renovations.
Can you just define, because this came up yesterday, the envelope for people who don't use that terminology?
Yeah, so a building envelope is exterior windows, doors. Roofing is obviously an item that's tackled with a sinking fund, but roofs, anything that's on the exterior of a building is considered the envelope.
Yeah, it's really the skin of the building. And you'll see, for example, in the 2019 sinking fund at Ferry, we did a portion of the roof. We didn't do the entire roof. So there are still some sections that need to be replaced, and we may do some of that out of the 2025 bond. There may even have been some of these buildings, we may have hit the roof in 18 and then the 19 sinking fund, and again, in the future bond. So especially some of the slate roofs, those are extremely expensive to deal with, and some of the gutters and drainage systems, if you've ever been in the tunnels itself, have been taking some time. It's pretty crazy down there with how the roof's all drained. So
So for Kerby Elementary, we have some building envelope work, again, plumbing, mechanical, and then environmental, which is abatement or removing asbestos-containing materials. So a lot of the environmental work will happen at the same time as we're doing plumbing. We're moving old stuff. At that time, we abate it and put in new that obviously doesn't contain asbestos.
Yeah, there's a fair amount of lead paint that's buried, which it's not a big deal if it has 20 layers of paint on top, but if you disturb it, you need to make sure you take care of it the right way so that you don't create dust and things like that. Same thing with asbestos.
So for Mariel Elementary, we have, again, building envelope works, interior finishes, plumbing, mechanical, and again, environmental work. Mason Elementary, same exact scope of work. Again, these are those critical items that we need to take care of for students to occupy those buildings. We have building envelope, interior finishes, plumbing, mechanical, environmental.
Yeah, so on these pages, a lot of these are similar things we're trying to tackle. If we went back for a second, just to back up to this page, you can see that the dollar amounts in each of those categories do vary a little bit. Obviously, each building is a little bit different. Things we tackled in the last bond and sinking fund, may have been different from building to building. We had the fun in the last bond too of having planned it before COVID and all the escalation that followed. And thankfully, we got a lot of that work done in 2020 and 2021 when the market was actually really good to go buy construction work. And then the last couple of years, it flipped and it got 30, 40, 50% more expensive. So we tried to do as much work as we could to make the buildings as equitable as we could, but the reality is some of the buildings that went later in the bond may have got a little bit less work done. But we tried to spread the money as far as we could.
What's the difference between life safety and security?
Life safety systems, when we say that, we're typically talking about are the life safety type systems, fire alarm systems, fire protection systems, so sprinkler systems. In a school, typically all the corridor walls have to be fire rated, the doors have to have the right hardware on them and be rated, the stairwells, things like that, so the kids can get out of the building if there was an issue. That's typically what we mean by life safety. Security is more...
I know the security. I was just like, yeah. I didn't know if that...
Yep.
What was the difference? I understand the security piece. Thank you.
Yep. Good question. I'm trying to remember where I left off.
So at Mason Elementary, again, interior finishes, building envelope work, so plumbing, mechanical, and environmental. These are the critical items. We did identify, obviously, there's $192 million roughly of needs throughout the district. So we did bucket other items for each building, which you'll see later in the presentation. So things like window treatments, furniture, items like that for consideration. Monteith, again, interior finishes, plumbing, mechanical, electrical, and lighting, and some environmental work.
Richard's pretty similar. And again, when we first went through this with Ben and Gary and the administration and myself, we had actually a lot more critical needs on things that we had in the critical need category. We probably had more like 90 or 100 million. Then we went back through it again. We got it down to 80. We went back through it again. We got it down to 60 because we know it's important to be able to do some other things across the district, not just mechanical, electrical, plumbing, toilet rooms, right? There's other needs across the district that need to be addressed with the new bond. So we wanted to try to leave as much money at this committee's discretion and the board's discretion as we could. Middle schools are pretty similar. Parcells, Pierce. Each building has some additional challenges that we'll talk about later. And then the high schools, a lot of similar stuff. Old buildings with great bones, but with a lot of MEP or mechanical, electrical, plumbing needs. And that's south. So again, this will go out. You can dig through it in more detail before the next meeting. If you have questions, happy to answer them. But we thought this would be a little bit more detailed than just a spreadsheet. So hopefully that's helpful. You want to hit this one? Sure.
Yep, so as I mentioned earlier, we obviously identified a lot more needs than just the 60 million. So what we did is we categorized some of the big ticket items for consideration with this group. you can see on the left-hand side of the potential project and scope, and on the right-hand side is a rough budget that we put together. So, for example, Grosse Pointe South main office renovation is estimated to be $750,000 endeavor.
So that's a good example of, in the last bond, we did put a new secure vestibule on Grosse Pointe South, but we did not move the main office to be adjacent to it, which is what we wanted to do, but because of budget constraints, we were not able to. So that's a good example of a kind of a building security project that is probably a pretty high priority if you talk to administration and people in that building. So we highlighted that one as a good example of something we somewhat solved in the last bond, but there's still a need there to make the building more secure. And a lot of the things on this list are things that have been talked about for a long time. I can't tell you how many presentations we gave to the board about middle school pools or to the committees. We've been talking about the IA building for at least 8 years, probably a lot longer than that. Obviously we did a big project at the media center here at North, but we really didn't tackle South's media center. So some of these are things that have been on the wish list, so to speak, and are part of that $198 million of need that's left out there, but not necessarily in the $60 million of critical need. So we thought we'd throw these out there just to get some of the conversations started. And then obviously there could be other things as well.
Can I stop right here just to give some more context?
That'd be great.
So, Mr. Matteson, you're going to help me with this slide too. Sure. So these are not included in the $60 million that we've identified. So what you already saw was the $60 million that we think are non-negotiables. So we have $60 million that are negotiable, and that's what you're here to decide today. You're going to be asked to do an activity with your group in a moment, and this is going to be your task. Please collaborate with your group to identify your top 10 items, and you're going to have a sheet to do so. And if you have time, because we are limited time, although we're doing pretty great on time, and this was our hope, was to give as much time for this as possible, to please prioritize and rank them as in order with your group, which we know is going to be difficult. You're probably going to have different answers, but if you can get the top 10 at least to us this evening would be great. Then if you have time, you can rank order them. Then what we've done is we've just started, because you may be thinking, I don't even really know where to start. So we've just given you ideas. This is not an exhaustive list by any means. You may have other things that you want to include. Please do so. The goal, and in a minute Mr. Matteson's going to talk like 20 seconds about each one of these, because you may not even know what Cooper Square is, so it's hard for you, if you don't know the complexity of the districts, it's hard for you to make these decisions. But so Mr. Matteson's going to just give a little overview of each of these, and then we're going to work with the group. Ultimately, we're going to collect each group's top 10 list by the end, all the questions that you had, and that will serve as the foundation for our next meeting, where we'll come back and answer all questions. And Plant Moran's going to take the top 10 list back, and they're going to see if there are any commonalities amongst all of the groups. Everybody agrees. I asked for the Grosse Pointe South main office relocation to be highlighted because I find that to be really important. You may or may not, but maybe that's one that is a reoccurring. So we come back next week and we say, hey, we're pretty close on 40 million of it, or we say we're all over the board, which is a different discussion. So that's where the activity is kind of, we're going to put you, give you some time. We're hoping that you can do this in about 25, 30 minutes. That's quick, so it's going to be a lot of discussion, quick work, and then we're going to ask each group to kind of break out and share. So if you can choose someone from your group that's willing to kind of share what you were thinking, maybe just your top 3 or just your general ideas, you'll each have about 2 minutes to do so. But Mr. Matteson, would you kind of share a little bit so they have some context, or at least the ones that we've included?
So I'll try to be, this is very high level, by the way. This is, I know we're going to get the meat and potatoes of this.
Can everyone hear Mr. Matteson? Okay,
yeah,
good. Sorry.
I'll send it myself. So middle school pools, for example, you can see that the allocated amount is $3 million to $20 million. So there are various needs at the middle school pools, the lighting, the ceilings, every location need to be updated. Parcells pool right now is currently unused. There are structural issues with that pool. The cost in 2022 to get that pool up to date was around $4 million, probably more now. So there's different pieces of scope that we could put into pools. Do we want to bring that pool back to life? Do we want to turn it into a robotic space? There's all sorts of opportunities there that can be discussed. South IA building that formerly housed ceramics and photography and drafting. That was moved to South Main last year. So currently that building is mothballed right now, and obviously it needs a designated allocation there as far as do we demolish that building and put a maintenance garage there? Do we bring it up to district standards and renovate it and make it ADA compliant? There's all sorts of, I'm not advocating for any of these right now, I'm just throwing things out there, by the way. We already talked about the main office relocation, South Media Center. Obviously North has just recently been done. South has not been done yet. North C building and auditorium. That was another issue where budget, it was removed from the previous scope on the last one because of budget issues. So that area is in desperate need of a total refresh.
Can I stop you just for a second, just for context? That's not just the auditorium, it includes many of our band and art rooms around the perimeter of the auditorium, if you're not familiar with that. So.
And a lot of the mechanical systems that feed all of those, which
Correct.
was at least $2 million, I recall, in the last bond that we could not do that we wanted to.
Storefront, there's just a lot of issues in that area. Cooper Square, as Dr. Tuttle brought up, for those of you that don't know, that's at the heart here of North. It's a below-grade lunch space where the students can eat outside. Right now, there are issues with the retaining wall right there. The district puts a lot of money into repairs of that wall. There's a few options there to replace that wall, or we could fill in that space and make it ADA compliant and make it more of a natural space for the students to enjoy. Classroom air conditioning, I know that's been a hot button issue throughout the district. That would be adding air conditioning into spaces that don't currently have it. Now, the caveat to that is obviously we have a lot of historic buildings in this district. So picture South Main with a bunch of mini splits in the front of it, or cutting, that gives you an immediate reaction to some people in this building. So there's a lot of complexities to putting air conditioning into certain spaces in the district, especially the historic areas. So moving on to remaining boiler replacement. So there are boilers in the district that are still in need of converting to hydronic. Obviously that would be more energy efficient to the district. Some of our boilers are 30 to 40 years old. So moving on to...
Actually, that's probably a good one just for me to chime in on.
Yeah.
Because we had a lot of discussion at every building about whether we would stay on steam or convert over to hot water hydronic boilers, right? And some we did because we felt like it was the time and we had the money in the budget. Others we didn't. But optimally, every heating system in the district would be a hot water system, not a steam system. So that's an idea of how much money that would cost. I think there's 4 or 5 buildings still that are steam.
Yeah, 6.
6.
Yep. So Pierce full-size elevator. I know this one probably is near and dear to Sara's heart here. So currently, the district just put a VPL elevator that houses between 1 and 2 students. Pierce is the only school in the district that does not have a full-size elevator. So what that means is for a student that needs 2 staff members with it, they cannot get up to that space. What that means is my staff, if they have to move desks, they have to carry desks down flights of stairs. If we change out the classroom spaces at all, any large supplies, large items has to be carried upstairs. And as you can assume, that's a very unsafe situation. We are still going to use the VPL elevator that was just installed last year, so it's not a replacement for that, and that will still be in use, but this would be giving that school a different option to get large items up to, or large groups up to that 2nd floor. Toilet room renovations at the high schools, that's focusing on the rooms that have not been hit yet, staff bathrooms. There are bathrooms in some of these high schools that have shower curtains in them for the staff. So that may be important to some people. GP North Art Studio TV production. So as I said, South's art space was moved and renovated last year. North's has not yet been done, and it's in desperate need for a renovation. Moving up to elementary casework, so that's going to focus on the cabinetry and countertops in the food service areas and other areas in that school, in those schools. Flooring replacements, any areas that have not been hit through the previous bond, they would be converted to LVT or carpeting or anything like that. Same thing with the LED and ceilings, anything that wasn't touched. Most of the class spaces have been touched, but there are some that haven't been. Also some office spaces that haven't been converted to more energy efficient LED lighting. Window treatments, that's blinds, that's your window coverings, things like that. Middle school, going to the elementary, middle school, and high school furniture. Obviously, if you've been into classrooms in this district, there's a lot of old desk. It's very antiquated. That would be the cost to renovate those class spaces, teachers' desks, students' desks, things like that. Information and technology. For those of you, probably most of you do not know that Parcells is the main hub for the tech team and the tech cabinets. So that is in the basement of Parcells, and we have a lot of water issues in that space. That's not a good spot for tech to be. So that would be the cost to relocate the tech to a first floor or second floor or another area in the district.
Yep, and I think about half of that is to move the head end room, and the other is for some additional technologies replacement, over the next 6 to 7 years. Some of the infrastructure, some of the cabling and things like that didn't make it into the sinking fund program, which has a fair amount of tech in it. But this is some additional things that were on the IT team's list. So.
And then Trombley, the district is currently replacing the Trombley windows, working on that piece. That'll be going out to bid here pretty soon. That'll be using the funding from the last bond. Obviously, you can see there's a 0 to 10 million. 10 million would be totally renovating that to district standards. And then the last one would be an athletic training facility that could be a place for year-round training in the district. It could be at a certain location on the district property, and that would provide that for multi-sport athletes.
Yeah, that one's kind of the odd duck on that list.
Yeah.
We put that on there because that's something that a lot of our clients are talking about. Obviously, there are some that already have indoor field houses. Country Day comes to mind. Brighton comes to mind. Dipsy Lincoln's got a nice one they just built a couple years ago. But that seems to be the wave of projects that are coming. As any of us with kids that play sports know, that you spend your whole weekend there sometimes. So we threw that one on there as a little bit of food for thought. And unfortunately, all the things on this list do not add up to 60 million, as you probably already figured out. It's more like 150 or 180, or this would be a really easy decision. So it is really hard to decide what's more important, furniture or an elevator or IT or air conditioning. So that's really the gist of why everyone's here, is to help us solve for X.
But reminder that this is not mutually exclusive. They can put other things
there
that
could
they've
be, there could be other ideas.
Trying to get your brain.
Right. Just trying to get everybody started.
All right, want to move forward with the...
Yeah, here you have those handouts. So really this slide kind of lays it out. Gary's going to pass around basically a copy of this slide and then a sheet for you to put your priorities on. That's really for next meeting. So again, if you can get the list, if you can get 10 things on the list, great. If you can get them prioritized somewhat, even better. We're hoping, as we kind of go through all the data before the next meeting, that there's a lot of commonality, and that'll make the next meeting
easier, or there may not be, and we may have to dive deeper into some of these things. Like the pools we talked about, you could do nothing to the pools other than fix Parcells structural issues. Or you could decide you don't want middle school pools, or you could, and you just convert those to other spaces, or you bring them all up to standards as 3 middle school pools. And there's probably 10 different iterations. I think on the IA project we had 8 different options that we presented to the board at one point. And I don't know that any of those are the right solution. So really we're just trying to move the ball forward. Go ahead.
So you said that we have about $60 million you're thinking about here. When you're pulling together this list of 10 things, should we try to keep that under $60 million or not?
I would not worry as much about the money as trying to get the things you think are the most important on the list, and then we can refine the budgets for those. You know, if we end up that we come up with 10 things and everybody agrees at the end of the next meeting and it's 80 million, then we have to sit down and figure out how can we get it done for the money we have, right?
It's a really good question. So again, don't try to think of the money, just think of the projects right now. We wanted to give you some idea of money just moving forward because we obviously will have to discuss that. But once we get a priority list, we're going to see how much we can get out of 60 million. That's really the goal of it. So yes.
You know, we showed utilization of classrooms, and we showed, you know, how population is trending. Is that going to be in the purview here of this? Because I would think rationalizing our future spend is kind of important to understand, you know, how the rest of how the district's going to be utilized, so we don't run into that same issue we had with Trombley. You know, where we showed the community we're going to put a chunk of money there, and then change the plan after that money was
So if you have an idea regarding that, you can absolutely list that on here. So that's kind of what we're looking for: is what are the concerns, what are your priorities, and then we're going to compile this, and this will start our discussion, the foundation of this discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions about what you're being tasked to do? Hearing none, it is currently.
Yep, I was just going to say, by all means, as you're going through it, we'll be walking around. So if you have more specific questions or you want more information, we're happy to try to fill in the blanks as best we can.
Yep, so it's 10 after 7 now. We're going to go to about together, please. So I'm going to turn it back over to Paul and Gary, and we're going to have the share out. You want to kind of share the rules of the game?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully everybody had some good conversations. I'm sure we didn't figure everything out completely, but we thought we'd just go around the room and kind of if each table can pick a spokesman or a spokeswoman to talk about what you guys thought were some of your top priorities. That'd be good to maybe start over here.
Sure. Okay. We started off with the Pierce elevator because we thought that was like a necessary thing. And we kind of, I think the overarching theory was, how do we make sure that these spaces are safe and kids can learn in them, and then we thought about extras. Then we went to the boiler replacements across the district because we thought there could be savings for the district there. The south office renovation, that's a safety thing. North's Cooper Square, we shouldn't have parts of our building not caving in. Then we decided, after much discussion, to think about AC for the classrooms, that it's a selling point both for teachers and for students across the district. It also gives a meaty thing to the public about what will result after this is over. Then we went to Building C Auditorium and the GP South Media Center. We tried to think about how can we equitably distribute resources across the entirety of the district. Then we went to furniture, because one of the things we know is that this is one of the few times that we'll be able to pay for furniture. There are other things like the sinking fund where we just can't use that money. So we went with elementary, and we ranked it elementary, middle school, and high school, just thinking that younger kids, high quality furniture for them is a safety thing as well. Then we had toilet room and the GP North Art Studio TV production.
Great. Yeah, and some of those, like furniture, for instance, so we put some budget numbers up there, but that's not to say you couldn't do it less expensively if that's what we have to figure out, right, to our point earlier. So, great list. You guys want to go next?
So we kind of took into consideration some of the things that were shared and looking at safety and security, but also things that impacted teaching and learning. So we had air conditioning as number one, information technology, boiler replacement, the GP South main office, the Pierce elevator was a necessity, and then for floor replacements, the LED lighting and ceilings, C building, and then window treatments and furniture.
Okay, great. You guys?
Okay, so we just made a list. We're not organized by priority. We talked about the main office itself, the South Media Center, along the same lines, North Auditorium, boiler replacements, the Pierce elevator, LED lighting ceilings, talked about furniture at all levels, and then the information technology. We had lots of great conversation.
Yeah, good. Those three tables seem to have pretty good consensus around a lot of those things. Yeah. Great.
Okay, these are in no particular order, but we did try to prioritize safety, innovation, and something for every building. And we listed the Grosse Pointe South main auditorium location, the North Sea building, the auditorium, the South Media Center, information technology, Trombley, whatever that might be, not necessarily saying what it would be, but we do think that we need to focus on doing something with Trombley. Cooper Square, the Pierce elevator, the lighting, the Grosse Pointe North studio, and the elementary casework.
Great. Next.
All right, we, along the same lines in terms of where we were thinking, had some great conversations. We did try to prioritize, probably our top ones are more accurate in terms of order, but we talked about the relocation of the office at South as a safety feature and a priority for us. The boilers also was along the lines of safety and also could be cost savings. We talked about the elevator at Pierce. We looked at the library at South and kind of lens of equity. We did this at North. How can we also have access then to that similar space at South? Culinary program or space at South as well. We looked at the AC. We said, could we be strategic and selective with that? And is there a way to possibly include that in the envelope when we look at if we're not adding the front facade air conditioners, could there be window film that cuts down on the and helps with climate control? And we talked about furniture at all levels was a priority, as well as repurposing Trombley. Not so much the conversation wasn't reopening it, it was repurposing it, wanting to use that space and leaving it there and making it purposeful. Looking at the North TV studio and then also the auditorium. That's our list.
Great.
Ours similar. We listed a lot of the stuff that was right away. Everyone talked about was the safety security stuff. Moving the main office, the south main office, the boilers, the ceiling, the LEDs, the informational technology, the elevator. That was all stuff that we knocked out right away. The toilet room renovations, because those will last for a long time, so that's kind of money well spent. Then we moved on to other areas which we felt were important. The North Sea building, auditorium, the media center, Cooper Square, but there's questions about what to do with that. Either get rid of it, use the money to get rid of it, or use the money to make it ADA compliant and stuff. And then there was, ironically, the air conditioning was a big no at our table. Even though we had a solid teacher, she was like, "They're fine, we can handle it." So
thanks for calling me out.
with transparency, you know. Trombley was on ours to do something with the building or get rid of it, and just to be as
we didn't say get rid of it.
No. Okay.
We said we need a plan for that space.
Right. And to be as transparent as possible, I did not mention a word about the athletic facility. I did not, but other people did at the table. I was a quiet observer, I worked on Flushings, the last two they had, and that was part of it. There's comments on ours about private funding maybe for that type of facility, but I know that those are selling points. So.
That's great. It sounds like there's a lot of commonality between the different lists and some very pragmatic things. I think a lot of those would help save energy and help save general fund dollars, operating dollars, and even simple things like the window film or window treatments. That does cut down on energy costs in a pretty low cost way. Did anybody have anything that was not on the list that came up at all?
We did.
Yeah?
It was the South Culinary space.
Okay. Trying to remember what specifically, just the kitchen?
To remodel the culinary kitchen.
Okay.
Or move it to a different space.
Move it.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right.
Well, as any good professor or teacher, you might get out of here a little bit early, like everybody would like. But what I'd like you to do is a couple things. We need to have all the cards with questions. If one person can gather those and hand those to Paul standing in the front of the room, as well as your top 10 sheet. Please hand that to Paul. As I indicated, Plant Moran will then digest those, and we'll start the next meeting by answering questions and telling the commonalities and talking through some numbers associated with what you presented.
And then we're going to email out tonight's presentation to everybody, and if they have questions as they look into the details more, who do you want them to send them to?
We'll probably have to do a Google form of some sort. We haven't cut up yet.
All right, so we'll set something
I'll
up.
have our communication director send something out, and if you have additional questions, to add them to the Google.
Yeah, we got a few, as we were talking about, like, okay, which buildings don't have LED lights where, or which buildings don't have air conditioning where. If you think of other things along those lines, let us know. We can dig into the numbers and come back with those answers next month. So.
Okay, any last minute thoughts for the good of everyone? Going once? Going twice? Thanks. Thank you so much. We meet again on April 9th.
Yep.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Yeah, great.